All right, Matt, you can go ahead and get started if you'd like.
I can get started? All right,
Yes.
sounds great. Well, hello everybody, and welcome to this webinar running through the whole device manager software. It's early here. I'm Matt Brower. I'm the US sales manager here in Boise. I think I've probably met some of you in the past, or at least talked to you guys on the phone. And so, I mean, essentially, device manager is a new software that lumps the three of our softwares together, some of the most popular features on all three of our softwares together. The biggest reason why is chasing three softwares versus one with bug fixes and updates and things like that becomes quite laborious. So we basically decided to design a software. It's like the one ring, it rules them all. So if you guys are familiar with Bioterm, Biostat, and Tag Manager, a lot of this is going to look really familiar for you guys. For people who are new to it, you'll probably see some really cool new features that that'll help you guys talk to both your handheld readers, and then if you have any in-stream antennas as well, like master controller systems with antennas out there, this software makes pulling data off of that extremely easy. So just some housekeeping real quick. I was going to show you guys some basically the file tools and help menu up here on the top. File is, that's how you actually exit out of the program. Pretty easy. Tools, there's actually this really cool tag ID converter feature to it here that you can literally just copy and paste tag IDs in. So if your reader got set on a different setting and you have basically all your data in hexadecimal and you need it in decimal, you can basically just copy and paste it right into there. Settings feature right here, the applications, things like that, wouldn't worry too much about this. The communication settings down here, this is actually how you would set up your remote comms. So if you have a cell modem out there in the world on like a remote site, this is actually how you would basically set up your connection to a cell phone modem. The help key right here, this is actually really cool. And I checked a couple days ago when I was preparing for this webinar, and there wasn't an update, and it looks like there is a new update now. Generally, when you open the program up, you'll be prompted that there's actually an update for the program, and so that's kind of a new thing that we've developed for this. So you're always staying with the most current version, which is nice. The about, this is basically just going to give you really the version number. And so if you call in and you're having some issues, a lot of times we'll ask you what version number you have. You can find it right there, or it's actually simply up here, actually in the header of the document right there. So let's run through trying to connect some readers real quick. So I figured I just have our popular HPR light here, and I figured I'd run through both the connection of the Bluetooth and also the USB cable, and we'll start with the USB. But I do have a IS1001 over here that's actually running on a Bluetooth logger. So I'll show you guys how to actually access it, and then actually tunnel through the Bluetooth logger and actually talk to the reader. So first things first, plug it in. Actually, first things first. So as you guys see up here on top, we have a plethora of some of our older readers up there. We actually don't have the cheese block on here, but we do have this generic down here on the bottom. And the generic is going to be basically just an open serial port. And so you'll treat this as like using Hyperterminal or even old Bioterm software where you know the baud rate. And so if you still pulling data off of cheese blocks, just use the generic one. But the most important thing is obviously to click on the correct basically reader, because what that does is essentially it changes your baud rate. Now, if you have several COM ports, so say you have several readers out there that you're using and you're plugging them all in, but then it'll basically make new COM ports for you. The easiest way is to unplug the reader and it magically disappears, and then plug it back in. And that's how you know which basically COM port to select. Now, generally, it's going to basically name the COM port with the reader. It does it on their HPR Lite, it does it on the HPR Plus, and it does it on the GPR. So once you basically have the correct reader, the correct COM port selected, you can basically hit the open key right here, and then you'll get a bunch of spinny fish that pops up. Now this is how you know that you're basically connected to the reader, when you basically get a lot of text that pops up here in this terminal window. And if this looks familiar to everybody, this is essentially bioterm. If you want to confirm that you're actually hooked to the reader, you can simply just type a question mark in, and it brings up every command that the reader has. This brings up the root menu of it. Now, once you start clicking over here into the reader settings, this might look familiar for a lot of people. This is a lot like Tag Manager. We've taken this, a step further, and there's a lot more to it, and you'll really see that when we start hooking up to the the IS-1001. Now, the nice thing up here on the top is that you do have the time and date sync, and so this will actually sync it from the time and date, the clock on your laptop or the machine you're using. If you're reporting to Patagus, remember that you have to set this in Pacific Standard Time. So sometimes this is not the correct way to do it, but it's a simple way to, especially if you're in Idaho and not in Washington and Oregon. You can change the reader ID right here. And so what you'll notice is this dashboard view over here on the left. For every time that you basically change something, you'll see the command actually given down here on the bottom. And so this push button function right here, what it's doing is it's actually giving the correct command to the reader. So there's no more hand typing these commands in. In the years past, to actually set different, features of the reader, you would have to type in, and you can still do it. You can still basically come down here in this window, and let's just do the one on top, RFV, and type it in, and there's your basically handheld version right there. But yeah, changing basically simple settings like this is fantastic. You can turn your beeper on and off, your vibration on and off, the auto shutdown, the backlight. You can turn all this. This is kind of a really cool new feature that we have, is basically the firmware update. If you're connected to the internet while you're playing around with your handheld, you can now basically link straight to the website, so you don't actually have to download the file, have it on your desktop, and then basically do it that way. It actually goes out and finds the most up-to-date firmware for you. This is also something that's new as well, is that as soon as you hit check for firmware, it tells you already that you're up to date. The communication settings key down here, this is essentially how you turn your Bluetooth on and off. Change your PIN code if you want to. I really like the 1234. It reminds me of Spaceballs. The memory setting, this is where you can basically all tags, unique tag, you can turn the memory off. I don't know why you would ever turn it off. And then, you can basically download all your data via terminal side like this, or we'll get into the tag memory manager side of this here in a second. Now on this screen right here, this, on your terminal window, instead of having to drag and drop and basically clear the chart, you simply right click on it, click select all, then you can actually clear the list out and start over. And again, to verify that you're connected, you can always basically hit a question mark.
Hey, Matt, back
Uh-huh.
to the update settings. Do you have to have your handheld reader plugged in, or will it automatically update via Bluetooth?
So the one thing that the Bluetooth feature of any of our readers, except for a select few, you do need to have the reader plugged in. You cannot update the firmware via Bluetooth. Now that's different with some of our Bluetooth specific products, like the Bluetooth data logger on the IS-1001 and like the fish measuring board. Those you can update through Bluetooth, but most of our handheld readers, you do have to have them plugged in.
Thanks.
No problem. Your report structure right here on your handheld readers, you really don't need to get too much into this. I mean, this is going to basically give you the SLA report, which is the settings report. That's the initial report that you actually get when you plug the reader actually into or you first make a connection to the reader. You get this already. And then, it's just going to give you versions, hardware versions, date, time, all that information. Really not too important. More of really just the reader settings on any of the handhelds up here, the first tab down, is going to be your bread and butter. So let's get into downloading some tags real quick. So this actually is very similar to Tag Manager already. And you have two tabs up here. The Device Manager tab is going to be all your reader settings, and the Tag Memory Manager tab, this is going to be where you pull your data off. So simply, you just hit download tags. So when this is going to pop up this little pop-up screen right here, and it's going to ask you for the download parameters. Do you want to download duplicate tag IDs? Do you want to download test tags? The cell modem connection down here, we'll get into this when we get into the IS-1001, but this is for remotely talking to like an IS-1001 with a cell phone modem on it. And it actually even warns you that it can be slower because obviously you're going through, phone at that point. But once you select your parameters, then you just simply hit download tags. Now, down here in the bottom of the screen, we can do it again real quick. There's going to be a buffer that pops up. And so if you have a reader like an HPR Plus that has a lot of tags, if you've got over, 2,000-3,000 tags on this handheld, you might think that the software is actually not doing anything. It's doing it. So if you just look at the bottom down here, I don't know if you guys can see it too well, you'll actually see the buffer come up, and it tells you how many tags that you guys are basically, downloading. So again, if you have several thousand tags, this might take a little bit longer. That reassurance is down there at the bottom to tell you that it is working. So once you finish that, there's going to be a little pop-up window right up here that basically gives you a summary of what you've downloaded. Now, as you can tell, I scan a lot of the same tags over and over and over and over and over and over again. This is my testing unit here that I basically use to test equipment and whatnot. So once you get done with that, then you're going to have all this information pop down. Now this looks a lot like Tag Manager because it pretty much is the Tag Memory Manager from Tag Manager. Over here on the right, this is a lot of this information over here is a way for you to kind of clean your data before you export it out. So a good example obviously is like the GPS coordinates. Well, this is an HPR Lite. It doesn't take GPS coordinates like the HPR Plus does, and so you can get rid of that. And so it's just a way that you can kind of eliminate some of the column headers that you don't really need. Antenna ID, signal and in millivolts. This is going to be your noise. File name, that's in relation to the HPR Plus. But the signal and antenna ID, this is going to be your IS-1001s. So we tried to make it a very broad software that fits all of our readers. And you can simply, with a click of a button, remove the duplicates. And we're going to remove 400 tags right there. Remove test tags. You can do all this before you actually even, export this data off to kind of clean the data up.
And Matt, is there a scan-in feature on this Tag Manager version?
There's not. So that is a great question. On the Tag Manager software is going to remain the same. We're just not going to pump any more money into Tag Manager at this point. This is we have a new data collection module software that's much better than Tag Manager is. And we're kind of basically putting all of our eggs in that basket. This software is kind of designed to, number one, change the settings of all your readers out there, and then download the data.
So how long will the original Tag Manager be available on the website?
Tag Manager will be on our website for another 6 months. It'll probably always be around. We're just not going to do any more updates to the software.
Awesome, thanks.
Mm-hmm. And again, if for people who are familiar with Tag Manager, there's still the exact same, export to Excel, and basically it's just going to make a file that looks exactly like this spreadsheet here. I can find where it went on my desktop. But for people who are familiar with it, it's just going to create a spreadsheet that looks exactly like this. For people who are looking to have their own Access database that they are housing all this information in, you can export it to Access as well, or a text file. Now, to actually clear this list right here is this button down here on the bottom. You do get a warning message that pops up, and you can basically, get rid of it that way. Just know that this information, until you actually clear that list, is being saved on the program. And so it's really important to actually, if you have several similar handheld readers, to actually change the reader ID name on them. That way you can basically organize it by which reader ID was out there. You can basically chop and paste which one that you want to use. And this just keeps adding and adding and adding and adding until you actually clear that list. But it does not actually erase it from the memory of the reader. To erase the reader memory is this giant orange button up here in the upper right hand corner with the big exclamation mark saying you're about to do something crazy. And again, this is flash memory on these readers, so when it's gone, it's gone. So we basically try to give you a pretty good warning that you're about to wipe your memory of your reader. So that's pretty much it for the USB connection. Is there any other questions that have come in? Awesome. So to basically hook it through the Bluetooth, for basically everybody who's lucky enough to have a Bluetooth enabled computer, I'll unplug this from the USB port. And number one, make sure your reader's on. And let's go ahead and we'll clear this list here. And we again select the correct reader type. And then we hit this Bluetooth icon. What is bring up the Bluetooth connection pop-up box right here, and you're going to select the appropriate reader. Well, a lot of people have a lot of HPRs out there. That number is actually on the back of the reader, and what I usually do is take a silver Sharpie and just write on the reader kind of the serial number of the reader. So once you find your reader, you just double click on it, and then your PIN code pops up here with the 1234, which is the generic PIN code. And just like hooking with a USB cable, it's exactly the same. The only thing that does not actually change, that you cannot do, and if you try to hit update, you'll get a basically pop-up window right here that says the USB cable connection is required to update the firmware on the HPR Lite reader. That is about the only thing that you cannot do with via Bluetooth. Everything else remains identical. It's a little slower than plugging it in, but not much slower when it comes to downloading data. So that's about it for basically handhelds. It's pretty self-explanatory, pretty easy to use. We can now hop into our IS-1001 readers. Excellent. We'll put this over here. So on the reader drop-down menu right here, you'll notice that we have a lot of IS-1001. We actually have 4 different IS-1001 reader types. The standard IS-1001 right here, this would be if you were going to actually plug into the mini USB port on the reader itself. Make sure that you have that Silicon Labs UART driver downloaded, just like you did with Tag Manager, just like you did with Biostat, just like you did with Bioterm. It's the same driver. What's coming out of the reader is actually serial data, and then you have to convert it back into USB data. And so that's what that driver is. So, and then the second one down is going to be your master controller. And so this is if you're going to plug into an MC and basically talk to all your IS-1001s out in the river and your master controller and pull data off of it. Now the BLE data logger. Now this is what we have in all the new submersible antennas, and this is what I have here in my office. This is the one that is going to communicate via Bluetooth to the IS-1001, but then allow you to have access straight to the IS-1001 itself. Now the USB data logger one right here, this would be a serial connection that you basically plug into the USB data logger board. But for this application, we'll select the BLE data logger. And it's quite funny, sometimes we have a lot of people call us and they like, I'm having problems talking to my IS-1001. They just have the MC one selected, and so the data looks kind of weird and different, but it's, you know, similar. So just make sure you have the right one selected. And then as you see right here, if we change, we toggle back and forth between HPR Lite and IS-1001, you'll notice something happens. Your IP and port address pops up right here. This is going to be for talking to cell modem sites. And so we added this functionality to this software. This is one feature that Tag Manager didn't have. So just like you were talking to your handheld readers, you basically hit the little Bluetooth icon right here, and it's going to go out and it's going to look for every Bluetooth device that's in the area. All of our Bluetooth loggers for IS-1001s will pop up as a micro logger. And so if you double click on the micro logger, same thing. So and right off the bat, it's going to give you a status report. And we can actually select all and clear this list again because I have a lot of tagging information there. But just like any of our readers, if you simply type a question mark in, this brings up the root menu. Now, for people who are familiar with IS-1001s, this menu looks really small. And that is because you're actually only talking to the Bluetooth logger right now. So you're not actually talking to the reader. Now, for people who are familiar with the Bluetooth loggers, if you type in CDC down here, it's going to open up a direct COM port to the reader itself. One thing that we did right here is, if you'll notice, if we just simply go from BLE settings, and you notice this menu is very, very small as well, and you can do the exact same thing like you did before, you know, sync the time and date from your computer. If as soon as you click into this IS-1001 reader settings, oh, now we're talking to the reader itself. Now you see, once by basically just changing from BLE data logger settings to IS-1001 reader settings, this CDC command popped up. And so again, it's the same thing, but now we're doing it by changing basically tabs itself. Pretty cool. So this is the full basically reproach structure of the IS-1001. And so people who are familiar with the IS-1001, probably this looks a lot more familiar. Same thing, it's, you know, you can basically put the reader in standby and you get your ROM 0. If you put it in scan mode, you get your ROM 1 and the reader's, you know, starts reading tags. Now, I am indoors with a bunch of computers around me, so this is going to look actually kind of interesting because it's going to look noisy as no other. Obviously, talking to a submersible reader, you can basically turn the reader on and off. You really don't need that thing beeping down in the bottom of the river or lake. Here's where you can actually change all of your standby times and whatnot. This is actually for bat folk out there. I don't know if anybody knows this, but the IS-1001 has the ability to shut off and turn off on certain parts of the day. So, and then you can basically change your standby voltages and exciter levels, your sync modes, but your idle time, and basically this is where the submersibles, you will basically change it as well to conserve battery life. But you can do the exact same thing. You can go out and you can search for basically new firmware to actually update either the reader or the Bluetooth logger itself. And here is where we'll get into more of the diagnostics pieces and parts of it. And so you can do a full tune right here, and the thing's going to start running through all the different caps. You can basically turn off the dynamic tuning. I would not recommend that. This is going to be your auto tuning feature of the actual reader itself. You can set capacitors, save deviation, set deviation threshold. This is where, you know, you'll run into where you have a reader that gets into kind of a tuning loop where it never stops. When you do a full tune, what the reader's going to do is it's automatically going to find the best phase deviation threshold. This is basically where the reader goes in and out of phase and it starts tuning. So you can actually bump this up to keep this reader from actually going into a tuning loop, if you will. So again, a lot of commands. What we've done here is basically taken the entire menu of the IS-1001, all these different commands right here, and put it in more of a push button, setting like this. So it's much easier to actually, play with. If you're used to a terminal window and actually typing in commands, sometimes this feels a little clunky. First time I used it, it felt a little clunky to me. But the more and more you start playing with it, the more it's nice. And it's really nice for people who are just, getting into this. So like your communication settings and whatnot, this is going to be basically your alarms, your tag communicated to a local port. You want these on if you have any sort of logger out there. And so what this is telling the IS-1001 is to try to push, well, to do two things. Number one, to save the tag record on the IS-1001, but then also to push that tag record to a logger of memory settings. Again, if you want to, you can basically download all your tag information onto this terminal window, but you can also still use the tag memory manager just like you did with the handheld readers. And I don't really have a lot of tags on this antenna. It's a new one. So pretty dang easy. Now, the one thing that is really, really cool about this is this IS-1001 diagnostics tab down here on the bottom. If you click on the live diagnostics, another window pops up, and hey, this looks it's a new version of Biostat. And so right now, obviously it's running on batteries, so we have a nice flat line voltage here. Our exciter voltage, if we were gonna, change the exciter voltage, we could, what are we at, 14 volts, so you can type into the terminal window down here in the bottom and actually adjust your exciter voltage. And just like we saw before, you see basically an uptick that we went from 14 volts to 17.9 to 18 volts. Same thing with antenna current. When we pop up the exciter voltage, we're going to get more current on the antenna. Gives you your caps rating. It should be nice and flat until we actually run through a full tune. And we can do that actually, right now. And then you can start seeing it actually run through its entire tuning stage. So this is a really, really handy diagnostics tool to have right there. And again, it's only for the IS-1001 reader. This basically portion of the software is actually not even available for any of the handheld readers. And same thing, we can actually run through all these different basically tabs. So instead of having the tabs across the top, we basically did it more in a push button sense like here. And so, yeah, we're seeing it basically run through its phase deviation or let's see, there's the relative phase. This is the one that most people are familiar with, the FDXB signal level. Now, this is your environmental noise. This is your noise, that's out there in the world. So the phone just rang. You see that spike? Pretty interesting. This was our full tune that we did right here. And you see that it's very basically noisy inside this. We're hovering right around 36 to 30 to 40% noise, which is what you would expect for an office environment. The temperature, this is actually the internal temperature of the sealed node or the IS-1001 itself. And as it's on throughout this presentation, you'll actually start seeing it's going to get a little warmer and warmer and warmer. But there's some really cool new features. Let me move my face down here, where you can now basically pause this chart. And so say you're calling somebody here at Biomark and you're having some issues, and we'll say, hey, do me a favor and send me over a chart of what your noise looks like. Well, you can basically pause it. Then you can actually save this, and it saves it as an image file, and you can actually shoot this over to us, or obviously you can just do like a snip of the screenshot. Once we get it going again, then you can also you can reset your charts. And so say you had a crazy noise event or something like that happen, but now it's nice and quiet and you just want to reset it. And then you can either reset this chart itself, which is going to be your noise, or you can do all your charts. So you can actually reset, like if we just do this one, we start over again, and we're still hovering right there around that 30–40%. The settings piece over here, this is actually where you would be able to update any of your chart settings if you wanted to change your basically period length and also your buffer length, but I wouldn't worry too much about that. But pretty cool, really, really, really cool. The fact that this is doing it through Bluetooth is actually pretty amazing. We've played around with this with Biostat for a while. And the biggest reason is this is a lot of information that's basically streaming straight to your computer via the Bluetooth. And it took a little time to actually for us to understand that. But one thing that's cool about the Bluetooth feature is computers can be kind of noisy. And so we've had issues in the past where people have plugged their computer into their reader, and then all of a sudden the reader got really noisy. And so that noise was actually feeding from the computer through the USB cable into the reader. And so this actually eliminates any of that dirty computer, noise.
Hey, Matt, are tabs available for individual nodes in MC Diagnostics?
Yes, and so if we had it for a master controller, you would see it just like you would in Biostat, where you'd see basically a bunch of different lines across the screen with a bunch of different tabs. So just like Biostat, but all in all, you'll see all your different nodes basically on the chart at the same time. Good question. So once you get done with that, you can actually just close this window, and it takes you right back into the new device manager software. So pretty cool. Basically bringing all our softwares together into one piece like that. We went through this again. On this tab right here, we're actually not talking to the reader itself. This is one good thing to mention. We're only actually talking to the BLE logger. And so that's why, if we change the settings from BLE to IS 1001, you get this warning that pops up here on the top. And so what this is telling you is that you're actually only talking to the reader. You've bypassed the BLE logger. And so the tag data is actually not being saved to the BLE. So that's one thing to mention. If you have fish that swim over, I can actually replicate that right now if I can get this tag close enough to the antenna. So you saw the tag numbers pop up right there. That data is actually not being stored on the BLE right now. It's actually being stored on the IS 1001. And so if we were to download this information real quick, that tag number will actually not be there. Yeah, it didn't save it down here in the bottom. So that's just one thing to mention, is that as soon as you're talking from, you tunnel through the logger actually into the IS 1001. That's why that warning message pops up right there. That's pretty much all I got. Oh, one thing is just like on Bioterm. Sorry, we have too many softwares. I think on my desktop I have 8 Biomark softwares, hence why we're making Device Manager. Just like in Bioterm, if you wanted to basically capture this to a file, you can click on that and it'll basically make it a file on your desktop and capture all this information right here. So this information is now saved on my desktop. And it's just like in Bioterm, it makes a text file. So there's all the new information that I just basically popped up. And I think I covered how to select all and clear the list. Yeah, there's a lot going on there. Probably shouldn't have done that. But
Hey, Matt,
yeah.
is Device Manager capable of working on Mac, or is it only a Windows application?
As of right now, it's only a Windows application. Good question. We're finally starting to get some really good. We had a Mac version of Tag Manager and Bioterm years ago, but we basically got in a fight with Mac because they wanted not just the software, they wanted equipment. And so, but we're finally starting to make some really good headway in getting this onto a Mac platform. I can't give you a time or date when it'll be available, but right now it's a Windows only. And I believe in Windows, it still goes all the way back to Windows XP. So for guys out there who are still using Windows 7, Windows 8, Windows 10, the software will still work, just like all of our other softwares.
Awesome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Cool. That's pretty much all I have for you guys. Is there any questions that popped up, Kendall?
Not at the moment, but we'll give them a few minutes to throw some in the chat or the Q&A. So
Yeah.
just send them my way if you have any questions for Matt.
And it's a really handy software that's really well thought out, and we tried to make it as simple as possible for everybody to use. It just, you can't combine all three softwares perfectly. The scan-in feature on Tag Manager was nice, but keeping up with that was very difficult. And so if you have Tag Manager, keep it. It'll never go away. If you don't have Tag Manager and you want it, definitely recommend getting it now. And then, it does require that registration key, and feel free to basically shoot any of us here at Biomark, kind of that 10-digit alphanumeric computer ID when it pops up, and we'll shoot you over a registration key. And then for historic users who want Tag Manager a couple years from now, we'll still have it. We don't know how well it's going to work. So we're just not going to basically keep updating it. And again, basically we have that new device manager software that's actually much, much better than Tag Manager is.
Is there a button to close communication with the reader, or do we still have to type control quit?
Nope. Oh, so this is a good one. So as soon as so I'll show you real quick here. Okay. Then we change. There's our CDC. And if we go back, it does it for you. So it actually closes that window for you. So you don't have to hit control quit anymore. You actually just change tabs, from basically, reader settings to logger settings, and it changes back and forth for you. But if you want to, you can still type in here. Again, this is just bioterm, so if we wanted to talk to the reader, you could type in CDC and we could hold control quit. And it will do the same thing. Yeah, it's not shift, it's control. There we go. And we closed it. So you can still type into this terminal window just like you did in the past, or you can just change change different tabs, and it basically talks to different pieces and parts of the reader itself.
Awesome, thank you.
Mm-hmm. And one thing to mention, the device manager. Again, there's too many Biomark softwares out there. This is a free software, and it's available on our website for download right now.
And then are you considering adding a scan-in feature for the HPR Lite? This is a really important feature when tagging hundreds of fish and adding corresponding length data.
Yeah, and so for that, keep using Tag Manager. The device manager is not designed, is not going to have this feature, and so just keep on using Tag Manager. But no, we're not going to add a scan-in feature to Device Manager.
Thank you. Any other questions out there? Feel free to drop them in the chat if so. If not, we'll wrap up.
I sped through that a lot quicker than I thought I was going to.
I know, you thought you were going to be pressed for time. All right, well, I don't see any more coming in at this moment, so I think we can go ahead and conclude. We will be updating our YouTube channel with the new recording either sometime today or tomorrow, so we'll send that out whenever we get a chance so you can share with your colleagues. And thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, everybody.